Good morning, people. It's good morning, Skull Nation, I should say. Welcome to Mike on the Vikes. Josh here for a rare morning episode. So if you hear any background noise, that's because people and things are up and about around the house. So if you can hear them, my apologies. But remember, this is low budget Mike on the Vikes podcast, first, YouTube second. So I just figured I'd give it a shot in the morning. Try to keep up on the weekly upload sort of deal. So today's theme is seasonal stats and sanity, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, don't worry, I'll get into that in a little bit. Newsworthy items there aren't many things going on. I was going to shout out that writer Lindsay Young over at Vikings.com. That's where I go to see if there's anything new that I've been missing. And you can tell it's kind of a slow news cycle right now. So credit to her for getting out actual content right now. But I thought it was interesting. One of the things she brought up recently was that ESPN did a top players at age 14 through 40. So the best players from age 14, 15, 16, all the way up through age 40. And, of course, our own Justin Jefferson came in at the best player at 24. And I guess it's kind of they kind of cheated, or they just got there in time, because I think he turns 25 here like tomorrow. So it's kind of sneaking in just at the last second, but obviously he should be the best football player at his age. He's the best receiver in the league, and we just paid him. And if you didn't hear my last episode or watch episode 17 on the JJ extension, you can hear why I thought it was an awesome thing. So if you're having any doubts about spending a ton of money on one player, go back and check that episode out. Maybe I can help soothe some of those strong feelings. And if not, go back and listen and just remind yourself of how great Jefferson has been and how awesome it's been to have him on the squad. Other newsworthy item, I'm really eagerly awaiting actual training camp. But I've been watching more and more things about J.J. McCarthy, trying to see how his early practices are going. I mean, it's such a small sample size, and it's overreaction season, right? So you see a great pass in one play happened to be recorded, and you go, okay, Super Bowl bound, right? But I did watch yesterday. I watched an interview by him just after one of the practices, and he's quote unquote saying all the right things. Like, no one's gonna start before they've even played it down and just try to say a ton of terrible things and get everyone off the hype train already. But he said them in a way that I thought was convincing. I think he does seem to have the right mindset going in. You can clearly tell, which was important for me. You can clearly tell that he knows he's not going to start, or he's not in line to be the starter unless other things happen. And I think that's important. Obviously, you want him to want to compete, and he even talks about how in that interview, he talks about how he's worked with Sam Darnold and Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins. He says he hopes to surpass them. Like, he's competing. He wants to have the starting job. You want a guy that wants to play, obviously. But, I think he knows where he's at right now. He hasn't earned it yet. And I think that's the right mindset going in. So, again, not saying he's saying anything that anybody wouldn't say at that time, if that makes sense. But, I still think that that's important to hear those good things when we get started, especially at this time of the year when it should be all optimism. It should be all hype. It's about creating the vibe so that you go into the season on a high note, because then you take a few good plays and that can really catapult you, or it can really springboard you off into success. So hopefully that's the case. So otherwise, I don't believe there were any other major news items. Feel free to respond to me on Twitter at JLime8. Find me on Facebook, Mike on the Vikes. Any place you can get in touch with me if there was a news item that you wanted to discuss, wanted to hear about, or something to that effect. So either way, like I said, it's a good morning, my Skull Nation, Mike on the Vikes. I have this cool coffee mug, Nothing Stops the Vikings, and with this great picture. My daughter picked it out at the store, so I get to have a nice cup of coffee while I record today, which is different than normal because it's usually at like 11 at night, which is not obviously a great time to have coffee. So anyway, let's get right into it. I titled this episode Seasonal Stats and Sanity, and the reason I titled it Seasonal Stats and Sanity is because some of these stats that I'm going to go over today are ones that we've been struggling with for a couple of years now, and they're stats that I think, had they gone our way, or had we done better in that category, we would have potentially made the playoffs, have been more competitive. Now, I'll start by saying I understand that stats don't tell the whole story. I understand that teams debunk stats all the time. A couple of years ago, the Vikings were 11-0 in one-score games, right? That was an anomaly. Helped us be successful, so you can't count on that, but things happen. So just being better at these stats, I have 4 stats for you that'll show up here in a second. Just being better at these stats doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go far, that we're going to become Super Bowl contenders instantly, but it'll make us a lot more competitive. And at the bare minimum, I wrote down in my notes that at the bare minimum, it'll be good for my sanity, because these are the things that you watch and you get frustrated on every game, and you wonder if we just could do that, if we could just fix that area of our game, we would be in good shape. And so, like I said, I have 4 stats for you, and let me know what you think in the comments or on Twitter or something if there's a stat that I missed. But here are the 4 stats that I think. Oops. Sorry, I'm still figuring this out here. Oops. Remember, this is low budget Mike on the Vikes. If you're on YouTube right now, you're like, what is he doing? Podcast people, I'm sorry. Here, wait a second. So I have 4 stats for you. Oddly enough, none of them are defensive stats, and I'll talk about why that's significant in a second. But first and foremost, turnovers, turning over the football. We were 31st in the league last year. That's second to last if you're not sure how many teams are in the league yet. We averaged 2 turnovers a game. The only team that was worse than us was the Cleveland Browns. It was so frustrating to watch, even from game 1, and it really set the tone. With game 1 last year against the Bucs, a game that we didn't play particularly great. We had, I think, 4 turnovers. If we turn the ball 2 times less than that, we win that game. The Bucs were not good. They were very fortunate last year. And we just blew that game because we didn't play disciplined enough football, and that is so frustrating to watch. And then it wasn't just that game, it was the whole season. Guys like Madison, who's usually been so sure-handed, Hawkinson had some really key fumbles. Like, there were just some players of very uncharacteristic cases of the drop season, the fumble-rooskies, and whatever you want to call them. And so turnover margin is pretty straightforward. In a world with advanced stats and advanced metrics and talent, the player talent, like greater than it's ever been, in a world with all these fancy things, turnovers remain probably one of the most key determining factors in a team's success, right? Look at the Cowboys. They lead very much near the top of the league in takeaways every year, and they are constantly a perennial playoff contender, winning their division, have one of the best defenses in the league. It's just obvious. You have to protect the ball, and you have to get the ball from the other team. And last year we didn't have a ton of takeaways, and so if you aren't taking the ball away to counteract your own turnovers, obviously you're just giving the other team more opportunities. It's the most simple thing when you think about football. So it sounds like I'm stating the obvious, because I am, but for my sanity, Vikings, and for your own success, if you're listening, fix that turnover margin. Stop turning the ball over. Averaging 2 turnovers a game is insane. Yes, you're going to have bad games, but it shouldn't be the norm. And so I don't even think I need to talk about that anymore. I think we can all agree on that. The second stat I have for you is scoring in the first quarter. We were 28th in the league last year at 2.4 points per first quarter. That's also so devastating. It hurts your chances of getting into the rhythm. I'm sure a lot of this is actually due to the turnover margin. And in fact, all the stats that you can see on YouTube, and those of you listening as a podcast, you'll understand when I get through all of them that they all kind of do go hand in hand. These things are not separate when you think about how they affect your team. And so we went from turnover margin, we were 31st in the league, to first quarter scoring 28th in the league at 2.4 points per first quarter. That's awful. And when you are starting out when you're spotting the team other possessions and other points, like both those stats say, you have a harder time to win games. It's just that simple. I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. I'm not offering any crazy insights. I'm just saying this is for fan sanity and for our chance in the playoffs. You have to do some of these things better. And so what I want to see is we have a great offensive-minded coach in Kevin O'Connell. I want to see game 1. I want to see beginnings of all of our games starting off with really good, efficient drives that are scripted well. Obviously, you have to adapt. If the defense can see what you're doing, then try to figure it out. But we got to try to figure it out before the first quarter is done. I want to get our offense. I want our offense on the field. I want field goals. I just want points. I want winning the field position battle. I don't know what it is, but we have to do better in the first quarter because we don't want to have to come back all the time. Yes, a couple years ago it was super exciting. I've watched the greatest comeback in NFL history a million times already with my son, and it's super exciting to watch us overcome that 33-0 deficit. But when you realize how we got into that position, it was the blocked punt touchdown, it was the interceptions, it was all these other things. You got to do better at the beginning. Stop putting ourselves in a hole and just play consistent, disciplined football. And you will win games even if the other team is better, if you can be the more disciplined team, if you can score first. Momentum is a real thing. Ask anyone who's played any level of competitive sports. Momentum is a real thing. When you're clicking, when you're in rhythm and things are going your way, you are going to continue to do that and do better. when you start off poorly, when you can't get in a rhythm, when you turn the ball over, when you can't score, when you see the scoreboard and you're down 10-0 after one, or 14-7 after one, or 14-3 after one, that's when doubt creeps in. That's when your mindset has to change. That's when you start pressing a little bit. You play a little bit tighter. You make those mistakes we talked about. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. But seeing them as actual statistics is alarming. And again, for my sanity and for the Vikings' competitive sake, please fix that. So we got to get better than 2.4 points per first quarter. That's just flat out terrible. Number 3 is something I've been harping on for years, if you've known me for years, and that is our rushing offense. We have not run the ball well now for going on 2 years. And last year specifically, we were 29th in the league at 91.4 yards per game. Let me just read you some of the teams in the top 10 of rushing yards per game. And I want you to think to yourself, are these teams that were in the playoffs and made runs? Baltimore, AFC Championship game. Chicago is number 2. They're a little of an anomaly. They had a rushing quarterback in Justin Fields last year. So I get that they're not necessarily a playoff team. Arizona, same deal, right? Not necessarily a playoff team. But number 4, San Francisco. Number 5, Buffalo. Number 6, Detroit. Number 7, Miami. Atlanta is number 8, but that's because Atlanta didn't want to throw the ball last year. Philadelphia is number 9. Indianapolis is number 10. Pittsburgh is number 11. Like, all these teams in the top 10 of rushing yards per game, with the exception of, the Bears and the Cardinals, there's anomalies with rushing quarterbacks. You have teams that not only made it to the playoffs, but made it far in the playoffs. Kansas City's the team that won the Super Bowl, they were 17th, but they still averaged over 100 yards a game at 109.3. And so it's not like they were great at it either, but they have Patrick Mahomes. So again, these are stats I'm sharing with you, but these are generalities. And when you look at anomalies like Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs, or the excess of rushing quarterbacks like the Bears and the Cardinals have, it's obviously going to be a little bit different. The point remains, though. You run the football well, your offense stays on the field. When your offense is on the field, you increase your chances of scoring points. You score more points while the other team's defense is not on the field, or other team's defense is on the field and offense is not on the field. It just makes it makes sense. It's just obvious things. These are basic football things that I want us to, maybe I should have titled this episode "Get Back to the Basics," right? Don't turn the ball over. Score first. Run the ball. This is making me sound super old and boring, but when you see them as stats, they just alarm you. And especially because these are probably a couple years, 2-3 year trends now for the Vikings. So it's not just that last year was an off year. 2 years ago, even though we had that great run to get into the playoffs before we lost to the Giants, right? We were winning a lot of close games because we couldn't close out. We couldn't build leads as well. We had to rely on our epic playmakers, which is what you want to do, but you also want to put yourself in a position where you don't have to do that all the time, because the percentage of chance of success is a little bit lower. So that's stat number 3, rushing offense, 29th in the league at 91.4 yards per game. I would love for the Vikings this year to focus on can we get to 100 yards or more per game? Can we rush for over 100 yards? I think adding Aaron Jones will help. I think he's a great change. He's still got a lot left in the tank when he's not injured. And I think Ty Chandler has proven that he's ready to take a step. So I think we have the pieces in place, aside from the fact that we have to make sure our interior offensive line is there. And I think that's something that will still be a question mark all the way up until we start seeing actual games being played. So I'm sure the coaches are all on this as well. But it just seems obvious. You got to get better at running the football. It opens up everything. And then the last stat up there is a little bit of a unique one, not one we think about too often, but it says the opponent's average field position. This is one of my new favorite stats to look at Pro Football Reference, because it also goes hand in hand with other things. Opponent average field possession for the Vikings was the 30-yard line, a little over the 30-yard line, and that's good for 28th in the league. So again, near the bottom of the league in where opponents start. Now, this will be interesting. I haven't gone through in detail all of the new kick return rules, but this stat might change significantly because of that. But even if you think about, most of the kickoffs end in touchbacks, you're giving a team another extra 5 yards there when you're letting them start on the 30-yard line. So whatever it is that we did in coverage or couldn't do in coverage, that plays a role here as well. And another thing that's going to play a role here is the turnovers, right? Because when you're turning the ball over, teams are usually getting really good field position. And so it's not just kickoffs, it's not just punting and shifting the field position battle, whatever you want to call it. It's also turnovers. It's also making sure you're not giving the opponent the football at the 50-yard line or in your own territory. And so I had four stats here for you that all kind of go hand in hand, and they're all offensive stats. They're all offensive stats for the most part, because I didn't mention the defense, and the reason why is because the defense was very middle of the road last year. It was improved from the year before, and it was very middle of the road. We were 13th in scoring defense. We were 16th in yards allowed. We were a little bit worse in passing yards and attempts and things like that. But again, all of that is based on, or not all of it, but a lot of that could just go up simply if our offense is on the field more. This upcoming season. And that's why I stuck with the offensive stats, because I trust Brian Flores. I trust that even if our defensive personnel at certain positions, cornerback, didn't get especially improved, I trust that he'll keep these guys at least middle of the pack. And if they're middle of the pack last year, considering some of our offensive inefficiency, I can't wait to see where those numbers will go next year if we have an offense that can stay on the field longer, right? Now, obviously, I'm never going to turn down like a one play 80-yard touchdown pass to Justin Jefferson. Like, those drives are not going to be we're not going to be able to stay on the field that long, right? But you want to have the ability to have a sustained drive, right? You want to come out of halftime, receive the ball third quarter, and eat up 7 minutes off the clock and score a touchdown in the third quarter. It's so demoralizing to the other team. We just don't do that enough here. Partly because we've had a high-flying passing attack, which is fun, but you have to balance that out with rushing with your running game. And I think that this year we really need to make a point about improving those things going forward. Yeah, looking at these stats again, we were number one in turnover percentage on offense. So while we were second to last in turnovers per game, we were number one in the percentage of drives that ended in a turnover. So we were literally the worst team, turnovers. And I think that's why I started with that too, because turnovers hurt your first quarter scoring. They hurt your rushing offense because you're not on the field long enough to be able to have running plays. And when you fall behind, if you're not scoring in the first quarter, you're not able to run the football as much. You might feel when I talked about you start pressing and you feel like you have to keep you have to keep scoring in big chunks to get caught up. Like, all of these things go hand in hand. So again, it almost feels stupid now that I'm talking about it, that these were the things I decided. But when you're looking into some stats in the offseason, you're trying to figure out where do we need to get better. It's staring us right in the face. It's so obvious, because I think if we improve all of these numbers that I've laid out today, I think our defense is going to get better. And if our defense gets better and our offense gets better, your team gets better. This is going to turning into the worst podcast episode of all time. It's like, I should have called it stating the obvious: how to win in football. Don't turn the ball over, score first, run the football, and don't let your opponent start close to the end zone. I mean, it's so simple, but I also think it's worthy of discussion, because when you see, I guess the other way to look at it is the stats that I laid out: turnover margin 31st, first quarter scoring 28th, rushing offense 29th. Average opposing start position for the opponent is 28th. All those, we're all in the bottom four of that category. So everyone knows all this stuff, but you have to be at least middle of the road in those to be successful in the NFL. So anyway, I didn't want this to be all doom and gloom, because this is the season of optimism, but I wanted to make sure that for my sanity and for Vikings success this year, these are things that we really have to improve on. I mean, if you imagine just jumping all these stats up into the middle of the road, who knows what our record could be, considering the talent we have to overcome some of these deficiencies. And so I think that we are still in a good spot for success if we can fix some of these basics. I'm trying to look back at some of these. We had 3 or 4 games with 4 turnovers or more. We had a couple games with 3 turnovers. Like, it was bad. It was bad. Now, we had a backup quarterback in for a large portion of the season, but you can't always blame that. There were times where we could have avoided the turnovers and still won games. So that's what I have for you. So anyway, let's see. Did I cover everything I wanted to cover? I think I did. So seasonal stats and sanity. Vikings fix those 4 things one more time. We were 31st in turnover margin, 2 turnovers a game. That's got to get better. We have to score more than 2.4 points per first quarter. That was good for 28th in the league last year. That has also got to get better. And please, for the 3rd year in a row, I've been shouting this from, the proverbial rooftop: run the football. I know you have Justin Jefferson. I know you have Jordan Addison. And hopefully we have a young, exciting quarterback that's throwing to them. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But we have to run the football as well. You have to balance it out. We cannot be 29th in the league in yards per game. And honestly, if we look at attempts per game, we were 28th. So it's not like we tried to run and we just couldn't. We didn't even try to run at some point, and maybe because we felt like we couldn't, or maybe it's because we were losing all the time. I don't know. But you have to run the ball more. You have to commit to the run, have some more sustained drives. I'm going to start, pounding, getting on my soapbox, whatever the phrase is to rally the troops for, long and sustained drives in 2025. That's going to be my calling card. I want drives of 6 minutes or more, as much as we can in 2025. And then I think we'll be successful. I think we'll surprise some people. I love that we're a little bit more under the radar this year because I don't think anyone's picking the Vikings out of the North this year. So, especially with Kirk's departure. So, let's surprise some people. Let's fix these things. Let's play disciplined football. And folks, we're only a little over a month away from the start of training camp, so we're finally going to get to some exciting things. What stats do you want to hear about? What stats bothered you the most? If the ones I listed didn't quite get you fired up. Let me know at JLime8 on Twitter, Mike on the Vikes on Facebook, MikeOnTheVikes.com, where I haven't done a lot of writing recently because I've been doing more of this. So hit me up if you have anything regarding Minnesota football. Hopefully your summers are going well and that everyone is safe and enjoying their time in the sun. And Skol to the bowl, everybody, starting it now. Peace.